Nothing like some good old classic Sonic, am I right? You know, speedy blue hedgehog guy who likes chili dogs. Especially when it comes to the Sega Genesis games, 2D Sonic is known for its genius level designs, amazing music, and its use of physics to make it stand out among most other 2D platformers. Using the terrain and Sonic's limited moveset to your advantage, you can enter a flow state of speeding through a level, zipping past obstacles with the grace of, well, a speedy blue hedgehog. I couldn't think of anything else. It's not just a matter of holding right to win, as some may complain. Rather, to get good at a classic Sonic game is more about reaction time and a general understanding of the game's physics. A good 2D Sonic player can be dropped into an entirely new level and still be able to blast through it like they played it 100 times before. It's important that the level design allows for this type of play, that it takes advantage of the momentum that Sonic brings. Because otherwise, you get something like Marble Zone in Sonic 1, where the game's controls clash poorly with the tight platforming, and you just get an experience that is just not all that fun. Most agree that Sonic 3 and Knuckles achieves this balance the best, also adding in more value to exploration than Sonic 1 and 2 ever came close to. So many secrets, alternate routes, and giant rings that you would miss out on if you just tried to blitz through the path of least resistance. And yet, even if you do choose to take those more obvious paths, the game isn't going to punish you for it as long as you're skilled enough. Sonic 3 really caters to all kinds of Sonic players, as opposed to something like Sonic 2, which definitely gave most of its attention to the gotta go fast kind of player. And Sonic 1, well, I don't really know what Sonic 1 is doing, but there was another 2D Sonic that was released on the Sega Genesis, or more precisely, for a Sega Genesis add-on. Nowadays, it's considered as much of a classic Sonic game as the Genesis's numbered titles, but for a while there was often just thought of as the other one. And even today, this is probably the most controversial of the classic Sonic games. In fact, I still struggle to come to my own conclusions on this game myself, because it tries something wildly different with classic Sonic, yet somehow still feels like a Sonic game. But at the same time, the way a lot of its ideas were executed tends to leave a weird taste in my mouth. You already saw the title, of course, I'm talking about Sonic CD, I really hope you figured that out by now. Sonic CD is a very strange game to me, especially with all of its time travel shenanigans. In fact, it's because of time travel that I've accidentally found myself in, prehistoric times? You might be wondering how I got myself into this situation. And, yeah, I stumbled upon a pass sign and wound up here. Perhaps I can meet my ancestors somewhere nearby. But before we can talk about my own opinions on Sonic CD, we need to answer a very important question. Why are there two distinct sequels to Sonic the Hedgehog, and why is one of them weird? The original Sonic the Hedgehog was developed by Sonic Team, which had been founded by three people: programmer Yuji Naka, artist Naoto Oshima, and level designer Hirokazu Yasuhara. Thanks, Wikipedia. Together, they created the character of Sonic himself, the famous levels such as Green Hill Zone, and the intricate physics that made this game a smash hit on the Genesis back in 1991. Of course, Sonic 1 wasn't a perfect game. It had some pacing issues. Not all levels took good advantage of Sonic's abilities. It was really short, the entirety of Labyrinth Zone exists, the special stages felt redundant, Labyrinth Zone gets a fourth act for some reason. God, I hate Labyrinth Zone. The 8-bit version does have good music though. The point is, with how successful the game was and how much room for improvement there was, a sequel was inevitable. But how to go about it? Well, Sonic Team decided to answer that question by splitting in two. Naka and Yasuhara would fly off to San Francisco to work with the new American team at Sega Technical Institute, or STI. This team would be the one to make Sonic 2. Meanwhile, Oshima stayed behind in Japan, where Sega was preparing for the launch of the Sega CD, an add-on for the Genesis that used CDs. Wow, these guys are really clever with the names. The original plan was an enhanced port of Sonic 1 for the add-on, which was shown off at Summer CES 1992. Look at how exciting this is! Marble Zone in a slightly different color with Nirvana playing in the background. This is gonna do numbers! For some reason, Sega suddenly wanted an entirely original Sonic game to be made for the Sega CD instead, and put Oshima as the lead. One of Oshima's main goals when making Sonic CD was to not make the same game as Sonic 2. He'd call up the team in America and ask what they were doing so he could do not that. The only major new addition that ended up in both games was the Spin Dash, but everything else focused on making Sonic CD distinct. Which is why it was a big deal when STI decided to scrap this time travel mechanic they'd been considering, because the Sonic CD team immediately went yoink and made it the central mechanic of their game. Add in an Amy Rose and a Metal Sonic, and Sonic CD would release for the Sega CD on September 23rd, 1993 in Japan, and November 23rd, 1993 for the rest of the world. Notably, it came out after the immensely successful Sonic 2, which had sold about 7.5 million copies worldwide. Sonic CD, on the other hand, only sold about 1.5 million, but it should absolutely be stated that this number is more than half of all Sega CD units sold, so by the standards of the console itself, this game was considered a bestseller. Like Mario Kart 8 on the Wii U, it was a successful game for a failed system. On the reception side, critics loved Sonic CD at the time of its release, praising everything from the gameplay to the art and especially the music, or at least the Japanese soundtrack. We'll get to that later. The game received high ratings across the board, but as time had gone on, the reception among players and especially Sonic fans has become increasingly mixed. This trend began as far back as 1996, when reviews of the PC port of Sonic CD weren't as overwhelmingly positive, and has continued to this day. It seems that every opinion on it either considers it a hidden masterpiece or the worst of the Genesis titles. As for myself, Sonic CD was one of the first Sonic games I ever played, thanks to the excellent mobile port release in 2011. Considering that I was exposed to this game at the exact same time as Sonic 1 and 2, basically jumping back and forth between each game as I progressed through all of their mobile ports, it's hard to pinpoint exactly what younger me thought about this game in particular as opposed to classic Sonic as a whole. But what do I think about Sonic CD now? Well, that's what this video's for, but it's also kind of weird because I don't really know. Let me explain. Now so we can actually talk about the game, and perhaps by the time we're done here I'll actually have an answer. Sonic 1 had a very minimal story, just go save the animals from Robotnik, and Sonic 2 was pretty similar plus a death egg. But Sonic CD actually has at least a paragraph's worth of story, and takes place before Sonic 2 despite releasing after it. So there's this little planet named, guess what, that suddenly appears over Never Lake for the last month of the year. It contains these special stones that allow a user to manipulate time, called the guess what? Also, this hedgehog named Amy Rose gets kidnapped and Sonic's gotta save her, as well as Little Planet as a whole, which has been chained down to Mobius by Robotnik so he can do evil things. Though, for some reason, the American manual calls her Sally Acorn, which is just an entirely different character in the cartoons. Were they just doing it for fun at this point? Robotnik's also got this robot copy of Sonic or whatever, we'll get to that later. Anyways, Sonic's gotta use the power of time travel to save Amy, collect the time stones, and restore Little Planet before Robotnik gets to do his evil things. Most of this plot is only really revealed to you in the game's manual, but you do get a taste of it in-game via this absolutely stunning opening animation. Like, oh my god, this is incredible. Even if this was your first Sonic game, you'd immediately get an understanding of who Sonic is as a character and why you should think he's cool. The music accompanying the opening fits perfectly, regardless of which soundtrack you're listening to. We'll get to that later. I mean, really, the only negative I can think of is how weird Little Planet looks, but that doesn't really matter to me, because look at Sonic doing all these cool things. Who cares about Little Planet? Now comes the part where we actually play the Sonic game. Now, to be honest, this is feeling a lot like Sonic 1, though there do seem to be more springs around than usual, and there's this cool pseudo 3D effect at the start. But still, this slightly slower paced, careful platforming reminds me a lot of that first game. Even the zones themselves, in their theming and design, seem to have direct matches to zones from Sonic 1. Like, this is just Green Hill, this one's Spring Yard, this one's Labyrinth, etc. They even come in the same order. The only Sonic 1 stage without an exact analog is Marble Zone, but probably because its CD equivalent was scrapped. At least Wacky Workbench is an original stage, right guys? It even does the whole Act 3 shtick that Sonic 2 would drop, though in Sonic CD, the third act of each zone is incredibly short and underwhelming, just containing a few monitors and rings followed by the boss. So yeah, everything feels a bit too much like redoing the previous game all over again. That is until you come across this strange pass sign, get launched through this tunnel, and then... Well, this certainly wasn't in Sonic 1. Yes, that's right, the time travel mechanic has finally come into play. So, here's how this all works. The first acts of each zone begin in the present and are littered with past and future signs. Touching any of these signs, then maintaining a high speed for a period of time allows you to time warp to either the past or the future depending on which sign you touch. If you fail to keep that speed, you'll need to find another sign and try again. Now, traveling to the future kinda sucks at first. It's all dark and evil and there are 2% more spikes than the present. But how did it get this way? Well, because of these robot generators, of course. You can't do much about them in the present, however. So instead, you'll have to go back to the past where the generators are actively generating, then destroy them, and only then will the future be all nice and happy for just that act. You have to do this all over again for Act 2, and then again for each of the first 2 acts in the following zones. Act 3 is a little different because it will always take place in the future. If you made a good future for the previous 2 acts, then Act 3 will be a good future as well, otherwise it's a bad future. If you want to say screw this and blast through all the stages, the game will let you do that at the cost of always getting bad futures. If you'd rather say screw this but make it happy, that's where the time stones come in. The time stones are this game's replacement for the Chaos Emeralds. You collect them by beating the special stages, which are actually really cool with these levels that remind me of Super Mario Kart tracks. Some may say they're too hard, but to that I say, get good, buddy. These ought to be hard, and this is difficult in a better way than Sonic 2's special stages are. I feel like I have much more control here and time to react than those. And Tails, as much as I love you, buddy, you gotta react faster, man. In Sonic CD, I feel like I can actually plan my next move to destroy all of these UFOs. Though, the way you enter the special stages is exactly the same as Sonic 1 and still sucks. I don't want to have to tiptoe my way through these stages in order to carry 50 rings to the goal. It's just frustrating. The point of the time stones is that collecting all of them will ensure good futures for the rest of the game, so that you don't have to go through with all that robot generator stuff. My issues with the time travel and everything surrounding it boils down to 3 main problems, which are a damn shame because this whole concept had so much potential. For one, the game doesn't tell you how any of this works at all. The concept of the robot generator is not mentioned at all within the game itself or the opening cutscene. Hell, it's not even said in the manual. Same thing with the actual function of the time stones. I know I have to collect them all because good ending, that's how every Sonic game works with shiny rock, but I don't know what they actually do on a gameplay level until I go out of my way to seek them out. But even collecting all the time stones takes at a minimum half of the game, and until then I'm still getting bad futures because I have no idea that I need to be going back to the past to destroy these robot generators. The game naturally teaches you about time travel at the very start of the first level, and I really appreciate it for doing that, but it doesn't explain what you're actually supposed to do with time travel. My second issue is that the robot generators vary wildly in how fun they are to seek out. I mean, first of all, you have to get to the past, which is easier said than done. A good few levels have specific spots that seem built for the singular purpose of keeping enough speed to time warp, which are appreciated, but if you can't find them, then tough luck, buddy. It's like, the game seems so against actually letting you keep your speed in its natural level design. Random rocks or springs that seem to exist solely to stop you in your path, future signs appearing out of nowhere so that you time warp in the wrong direction. The Super Peel Out, Sonic's new ability, seems like it's meant to help with all this. It leaves you vulnerable to attacks unlike the Spin Dash, but it's also faster than a Spin Dash, getting you to top speed almost immediately. Unfortunately, most uses of the Super Peel Out end seconds later with slamming into an enemy that you couldn't see coming. Even trying to use it to get a head start seems frowned upon. Like, what the hell's your problem, Collision Chaos Act 1? Is it really so important that I stop in my tracks to watch Amy get kidnapped by Metal Sonic that you have to punish me for trying to go fast in a Sonic game? Rarely does it feel like I'm using the terrain to my advantage to time warp. Rather, it feels like the game is forcing me to use the specific points in a level designated for nothing else other than time travel. And then once you do get to the past, you gotta find the damn generator. Some of these hiding spots are brutal, with me searching for so long that the timer freezes at 10 minutes. But the worst one by far is in Wacky Workbench Act 1. What do you mean I have to get crushed by this one particular crusher that doesn't actually crush you and sends you down a pipe to the generator? What do you mean? God, I hate Wacky Workbench. My third issue, and perhaps the strongest, is that the game fails to answer the question of why should I care? Why should I bother with doing any of this? The 4 time periods don't feel different enough to justify going out of my way to see all of them. The good future is barely changed from the bad future outside of visuals and music. Act 3 of each zone is the only time that going to the future is actually required, and yet the same amount of monitors and hazards appear no matter what you do. The bosses stay the exact same too. It's not like the good future makes them easier or quicker or anything. And the bosses absolutely suck in this game. They're all super underwhelming, and it often feels like you're just waiting for openings, which isn't something the other classic Sonic games did nearly as often. I mean, for Quartz Quadrant, you're just waiting for the boss to defeat itself. And yes, the good future is usually a bit safer than the bad future, but with how much trouble you have to go through to get access to the good future, why not just stick to the present or past then? It feels like the game just really wanted to advertise having over 50 levels. Perhaps the game should have required me doing something in the future of a stage after destroying the robot generator in the past to ensure that the future would actually be good or something. I know that would make the whole process take even longer, but if I'm going out of my way already to slow down and search for these robot generators, then the game might as well make the most of my time. Perhaps go all the way, force me to go to the future to reach the signpost at the end of the stage. I don't care, just give me something. I mean, really, the only reason I'd ever travel to all these time zones, rather than just going to the past and moving on, is to see the visual differences and enjoy the music. And speaking of the music, oh my god, the music is incredible! This is the one positive thing that the majority of people who play Sonic CD agree upon. But then it's immediately followed by the argument of which version of Sonic CD's music. Because of course there are two soundtracks. See, classic Sonic is known for having good music. In fact, the Sonic series is known for having its music be consistently strong no matter the quality of the rest of the game. But the Sega CD had the ability to stream CD quality audio. This means that the audio budget was increased for the sake of making the game sound as good as possible. For the game's release in Japan, as well as Europe and other PAL regions, the composers went for an early 90s club music style for most of the soundtrack, and the result is nothing short of a masterpiece. The whole OST is groovy and generally upbeat. Perhaps a bit too upbeat? Like, come on guys, we just started the game, why are we cheering so loudly? There's a similar problem with Metallic Madness Bad Future, because if you're hearing this song in Act 3, that means you've utterly failed at getting the good ending. So perhaps we should lower it on the groovy scale, you know? When it does decide to slow itself down, you get some much more relaxing tunes as well, such as in Tidal Tempest or Quartz Quadrant. The overall result is one of the best soundtracks in any Sonic game, even if its opening song has completely gibberish lyrics. But here's the thing. When Sonic CD was being localized, Sega of America decided, hey, this music that was composed to specifically appeal to American audiences won't appeal to American audiences because we say so. Hey, Spencer Nilsson, could you completely redo the soundtrack? You have a month. Good luck! With such a short time to work, the Sonic CD US soundtrack should be considered a miracle for how fantastic the music ended up being anyway. The songs are instead much more focused on atmospheric rock, with excellent guitars provided by Eric Frickman. It's slower, which might fit the greater focus on exploration better than the fast-paced Japan soundtrack. The biggest drawback of the otherwise great US soundtrack is the lack of past themes. Due to hardware limitations and time constraints, they couldn't be redone, meaning that you'll experience musical whiplash every time you warp to the past and get your careful, deliberate US music replaced with a blasting, funky Japan song. The silver lining is that the Japanese soundtrack is still really good, and you'll get to hear Quartz Quadrant Past's wonderful piano solo no matter what soundtrack you're playing the game with. But if you really want past themes for the US soundtrack, there are some excellent fan-made ones on the internet, the best being by King Meteor Studios. Some of these sound like Metroid songs, which is good for me because I really like Metroid music. So then comes the obvious question, which soundtrack is better? Or perhaps, which one do I like more? Because I think the answer for you depends on what kind of music you like more. It's not like both soundtracks try to do club music or both try to do atmospheric rock. They both execute the genres they intend to be really well. So to call either OST bad because it doesn't sound like the other says more about what kind of music you think is bad rather than the quality of the soundtrack itself. It's more of a, wow, two cakes kind of situation. But if I had to pick one, personally, I happen to like atmospheric rock more than I like club music. And as a result, I'm in the minority group that prefers the American soundtrack over the Japanese one. Those guitars are just too good, man. Also, the opening and credits songs are better by a mile. Sonic Boom having lyrics that actually make sense is a big help for that. I do think that the American soundtrack has more flawed sections compared to the consistently good Japanese OST. Like, in the US, Tidal Tempest only really shines in its bad future, Quartz Quadrant Present just sounds kinda weird, and Wacky Workbench actively makes me mad in all of its aspects. There's also the boss theme and the game over themes, which are probably the biggest factor in driving away people from the US soundtrack. Yeah, I have no defenses for those. It's best to say that the US has higher highs and lower lows. It's also a damn shame that the best songs in the US OST are at the same points as the best songs in the Japanese OST, which means that Sega will forever ignore the American songs whenever they want to make a Sonic CD reference in the more recent games, such as in Sonic Mania. That game loves acknowledging Japan's soundtrack. Do you want an official remix of an American song? Well, we got one in Sonic Forces. At least fan-made remixes exist, such as those by Robin Nerdington. Excellent name, by the way. Can I just please have a second to gush over Metallic Madness Present? This is one of my favorite songs in any Sonic game ever, and at the very least is my favorite final level theme for any Sonic game. Even better than Death Egg Zone from Sonic & Knuckles. Which is why it frustrates me to no end that the Japan version is also so good and so popular. Because when I want to listen to remixes and such, the American version gets like 6, while Japan gets 500,000. It's just the roughness of it, the mechanical parts, really screams the metallic part of Metallic Madness. And that guitar lick is beautiful, enough to make a grown man cry. Really drives home the finality of this stage. Even both of their future themes are amazing, from the rough guitars in the bad future that have just a hint of hope left when all seems lost, to even the bongos in the good future. Perhaps that last part is where I finally lose you when it comes to my music taste, but there's just nothing like this soundtrack in video games, and I doubt there ever really will be. This game's music is nothing short of beautiful, no matter which soundtrack you choose to listen to. For me though, America is on top. It just hit me now that I haven't really talked about the levels themselves, as much as I've talked about everything surrounding them. See, the thing is with most of these, is that they kind of feel a bit cluttered. I mean, to call them complete mazes would be exaggerating. In almost every case, you're either generally going to the right or following a more linear path. It's not like I don't know where I'm supposed to go if I'm just trying to reach the goal, but getting there is a whole different story. To put it simply, almost every level could have been called Collision Chaos, especially Collision Chaos itself. But for almost every other stage, I feel like I'm stuck in a pinball table, at the mercy of whatever bumpers and springs surround me. At the very least, I have more control than the Sonic series' actual pinball game. But it's not as much as I'd really like. Zones are littered with little pits or side paths that only exist to launch you back up the way you came and nothing more. And on top of this, all classic Sonic games have these random springs that seem to only exist to troll you. These are expected to exist to some extent, but Sonic CD turns it up to 11. Sometimes they're present solely for the purposes of time warping, which makes sense, but other times it feels like they only exist to break whatever flow I currently had in the level I was playing. I mean, everyone loves Stardust Speedway, right? Funky aesthetic, great music, Metal Sonic Race, but have you actually played Stardust Speedway? The level feels so dedicated to making you turn around, to specifically have you blast off backwards because you dare assume that this path you're currently taking would actually let you progress through the stage. And because of the semi-chaotic nature of the level design being omnipresent throughout the whole game, there's not as much to stand out to me. Like, every level may look and sound different, but they're all designed the same. And when a stage does try to have some sort of unique characteristic, you get mixed results. But despite everything, I can't call most of these levels outright bad. With perhaps a wacky workbench-shaped exception, these still feel like Sonic levels. Just a different, more chaotic set of Sonic levels that I'm used to. There's still room for skill and still room for speed, but it's just that you'll feel like you're working against the game to achieve it, rather than working with the game. Perhaps you want your speed to really be earned, and think that Sonic 3 and especially Sonic 2 are too generous. Well, Sonic CD would probably be the game for you, because it makes sure that you earn your speed. Perhaps it would be best if I talk about the zones individually. If I had made this video back in 2022 when I had originally planned to, that probably would have been the only thing I had done, and this video would have been 4 minutes long. I've come to the conclusion to save this part for last because I think it's most important to discuss pretty much every other aspect of this game in order to truly appreciate and understand the flaws in each level of this very interesting Sonic game. So, let's begin. Palm Tree Panic feels the most like any other Sonic game. Very open, easy places to gain speed, very clearly sets out to be this game's Green Hill. But it's not afraid to show its identity as a Sonic CD level loud and proud. It introduces the time travel mechanic in a very natural way, clearly shows the distinctions between time periods, and already has pieces of much slower paced, tighter platforming in the upper sections of the stage, preparing you for the rest of the game. It also has this cool semi-3D set piece at the start of Act 1. In Act 2, however, you can already begin to see the signs of this game's spring-happy nature. You're gonna have nightmares about that sound effect by the end of the game. The boss, sucks though. All you gotta do is get behind him before he drops down and he'll die almost instantly. Collision Chaos certainly lives up to its name. Despite the fact that you're pretty much always bouncing around and spend very little time on stable ground, it rarely feels like you don't have control. Rather, it just feels like you're controlling yourself in the air. It feels like the game is trying to force you to learn its physics, and I mean, it certainly did a job at that. That being said, Act 1 might have one of the worst first impressions for any level in any 2D Sonic. I am shocked that a set of spikes immediately at the start of the level that require you to stop and wait for a cutscene before even collecting a single ring got through quality assurance. Genuinely embarrassing, and the fact that this happens so early in the game feels discouraging for the player. You won't take as much initiative because something like this could happen again for all you know. Act 2 seems to enjoy having springs and spikes snap up from the ground, but they make sure that the spikes you can see coming and the springs are dedicated to launching you forward, and therefore aren't actually that annoying. In fact, they can be quite useful to get to a high speed quickly. They could also be a nuisance if you're looking for the robot generator and have to turn around, though. And remember what I said about feeling like a pinball table? Well, wait till you hear what the boss is! Still 100 times better than Sonic Spinball though. Tidal Tempest is actually pretty great for a water level, at least by classic Sonic standards, only being out by Hydrocity from Sonic 3. Or is it Hydro City? Please argue in the comments so I can get engagement. It's much less cramped than Labyrinth Zone and isn't nearly as long and tedious, but it also makes sure that you actually go in the water, unlike Aquatic Ruin Zone, which just doesn't seem to care. I really like how the different time periods have water at different levels. Also, this zone has some of the least cruel placements for the robot generators, probably to make up for the whole underwater thing. There's this endlessly looping pit at the start of Act 2, I always love seeing those sorts of things. The boss has this really cool idea of a shield made out of your only air source, so by removing the shield, you're removing your only source of oxygen. The problem is that, once you do make it through the shield, the boss dies in one hit, so you're never gonna be in danger of drowning, which kinda defeats the whole point. Quartz Quadrant feels, how do I put this? It kind of feels like multiple Mario levels stacked on top of each other. Very similar paths that are only connected by the gaps you have to jump over or these random holes that let you switch between layers. This zone feels shockingly empty compared to most other Sonic CD stages. It's a bit too open, especially considering that it's supposed to be in a mine, I think? At least there's the conveyor belt mechanic, which I actually really like. It's not overpowering when you're running against it to the point that you're annoyed by its presence. Want to use the conveyor belt in your favor, such as for time traveling? You can choose to flip its direction. The boss is unfortunately the worst in the game, just running on a conveyor belt until Robotnik literally defeats himself. And then there's Wacky Workbench. Wacky Workbench is awful. Like, this stage is the only one in the game that I actually consider bad, all because of its central gimmick. See, the floor bounces you upward, way upward, to the top of the screen, where you are trapped and have to slowly climb down, usually requiring a blind jump onto a small moving platform down below, which if you miss, will just bounce you back up again. The only way you're supposed to progress is to slowly jump from moving platform to moving platform, for the entire stage, for both acts. Act 1 is genuinely atrocious, and I had already talked about its robot generator placement, which is truly baffling. Act 2 isn't as criminal with the bouncy floor, as it actually wants you to be up in the air, with a lot more open space as well. And to make up for Act 1's generator placement, they decided to put Act 2's at the very start of the level. Right there. I hope you caught that in the split second you zipped past it, or else you'll never think to check that close to the start of the level. The flashing lights on the floor will give you a headache, the Japanese soundtrack for this level is kinda and the American version is downright obnoxious. This zone in Act 1 in particular might be the worst level in all of classic Sonic, and I'm not even the only one that thinks that. Worse than Marble, worse than Metropolis, worse than even Labyrinth Zone. The boss, just like all the ones before it, is super underwhelming and easy. I don't even have anything to say about it, but that's probably just because I want to get away from this zone as a whole. Stardust Speedway is good. In fact, I actually really like it. Despite what I said about it earlier, it's kind of fun to watch Sonic just zoom around the place, even if you don't end up making much progress by the time you come to a stop. That is, if you even come to a stop at all. This level just kind of always keeps you moving, but in a much more entertaining way than Collision Chaos or, God forbid, Wacky Workbench. Even if you're getting launched all over, you never really feel annoyed by it. Just go with the flow in this stage, and you'll have a very good time. If you're going for the robot generators though, take the bottom paths at the very start of each act. You'll find them very quickly, and then can spend the rest of the level just zipping about. At the very least, you won't have much trouble with time traveling. What stands out to me the most about Stardust Speedway is that it's freaking huge! I mean, just look at these level maps. No two playthroughs of this stage are the same, just by the sheer number of paths that weave in and out of each other constantly. There's even these little signs you can flip to switch between two paths that directly overlap each other. Together with the great atmosphere, you've got the recipe for one of Sonic's most iconic stages. And the boss, which is a race against Metal Sonic, is the only good one in this entire game. The race is genuinely tense because it's really stacked against you. Metal can break through spikes and blast forward ahead of you when you least expect it. You'll likely be cutting it close and it'll be exhilarating the whole time. Maybe there could have been a few less spikes, but to be honest, I'm not sure how you keep the race a difficult one without them. The Japanese song for this race is legendary, and the American one is pretty great as well, and deserves much more appreciation than just getting a remix in Sonic Forces. Actually, you know what? They did also give the same song a different remix in Sonic Generations, as like a neat little unlockable. The rest of the American soundtrack can get screwed, I guess. Okay, so this might sound kind of insane, but I think Metallic Madness might be my favorite final zone in a classic Sonic game. I like it more than Death Egg, and that's probably like 50% recency bias, but I think that Metallic Madness's level design fits more coherently with the rest of the game than most final levels do. Because pretty much every final level in classic Sonic slows the game down significantly to focus on platforming and actual obstacles. Even in the glorious Sonic 3 and Knuckles, the only time you're really going fast in Death Egg Zone is these light-speed glorified cutscene things. But since Sonic CD has focused on that so much more throughout the entirety of the game, it feels much less jarring here. It just kind of fits better. The other classic Sonic games seem to train you for Green Hill Zone-like levels, which you see less and less as their games go on. But in Sonic CD, I've been trained for this final level specifically. And for the kinds of levels that Sonic CD is trying to make, Metallic Madness arguably executed it best. Let's be clear though, you won't be going fast in the way you may imagine in a Sonic game. No, the best you can do is be smooth, which may not be as flashy as just blitzing through a stage, but arguably more skill reliant and just as rewarding. If you really want to pull some wacky Sonic speed shenanigans, it's got you covered in that department as well if you know where to look. And Act 2 may have a pretty frustrating robot generator placement, but how can I be angry when Mini Sonic is right there? Aw, he looks so small and underutilized. Seriously, I wonder if making an entire new set of tiny Sonic sprites was supposed to be some sort of flex for the Sega CD. I mean, it took Nintendo until like 2006 to do the same thing with Mario. The music might be even more legendary than Stardust Speedway, whether you're listening to the popular Japanese track or the super awesome and underrated and arguably better American one. Man, I really love Metallic Madness. Except for Act 3 and its boss because it's super underwhelming just like the rest of the game's bosses. This might have been the only time where giving a player no rings for the final fight could have been justified. And that's Sonic CD. You know, when I started writing this script, I didn't actually know what my final conclusion on this game was going to be. I literally said as much at the start of this video. I wanted to love this game, that was my hope, but I had fear that its issues would stack too high and I would finish with an overall negative opinion. But by the time I've gone to the end, I think I can say that I do love this game. It's so weird because I don't think I've ever unironically liked a game this flawed this much. Perhaps it's because it's built on the very strong base that is the classic Sonic formula. A base so strong that not even its many failed missteps on the quest to be unique were able to overpower. But I know it can't just be that, because I don't think I've ever had this much to say about any other Sonic game, even the ones that I think are objectively better, such as Sonic 3 and Knuckles or Sonic Mania. I know it's not just because this was one of my very first Sonic games, because I was playing this one simultaneously with Sonic 1 and 2, and while I do think Sonic 2 is an objectively better game as well, I also don't think I actually have as much passion for it as I do for Sonic CD. There's so much to say about it, from its incredible highs in the music, to the potential of the time travel mechanic, to the glorious disaster that is Wacky Workbench. The way it tries something so alien for the Sonic series so early in its existence is fascinating to me. The way it executed it even more so. How it considers getting skilled and going fast to be so different in practice compared to any other Sonic game makes it stick out to me in its replayability compared to most other Sonic games. To be really good at Sonic 2 means that you'll probably also be really good at Sonic 3, but whether you'll also be really good at Sonic CD is a different story. I've said before that the worst thing a game can be is uninteresting, and Sonic CD is absolutely far from uninteresting. In my opinion, it's the most interesting Sonic game out there, and perhaps that's why I love it so much. Who knows? Perhaps you should play it for yourself and get back to me on if you agree. Or don't if you're gonna be stubborn like that. And while you're at it, give the American soundtrack a listen. It deserves more love. Well then, I was actually really surprised at how positive my final conclusion ended up being. I'm really glad it turned out that way. By the way, while none of you were looking, I ended up meeting some ancient ancestor of mine like I was planning to. I even took a selfie with him. Or he might have been a distant cousin, maybe, I don't really know. Anyways, it's about time I head back to my own time, in the present. Let's just hope that my time traveling shenanigans haven't messed anything up. Damn it. Should have never stepped on that bug by accident. Stupid butterflies and their effects.
In the end, who's on your side? Who can you trust? In the middle of the night, where will you be? If you can't find you, there's no place to go.